Let's talk about the transport of food and minerals in plants. Now, what is diffusion? The movement of the various substances into a plant, usually from the soil, out of which the green plant synthesizes the numerous complex organic compounds, is accomplished principally through the agency of the process known generally as diffusion. It further says, according to the kinetic theory, the molecules or the ions of all the substances, that is, the gases, the liquids, the solutes or the solids, are the constant motion in all the directions, which is due to their individual kinetic activity. This is called diffusion, as it is shown in the picture above. In a mixture of several substances separated by a membrane, the molecules or the ions of each substance will diffuse in that direction, which is from a region of its own higher concentration or pressure to its own lower concentration or pressure, or in other words, from a region of its own higher activity to one of its own lesser activity of the particular substance concerned. And the direction of this diffusion is independent of the direction of the diffusions of the ions or the molecules of other substances present. From the plants, the outward diffusing water vapor molecules in transpiration or oxygen evolved in photosynthesis do not carry respiratory carbon dioxide with them, but each gas diffuses independently of the other, depending only on the difference of its own concentration or pressure inside and outside the plant. In the picture above, it shows the extracellular space and the intracellular space. I hope the diffusion part is clear for you all. Now let's talk about osmosis. When two liquids of different densities are separated from each other by placing a membrane between them, by which the water of the liquid of the lower density flows towards the liquid of the higher density, then such separating membrane is called the semi-permeable membrane. Only the solvent or the water may pass through such membrane. The solute or the dissolved substance in the water cannot pass through it. For example, parchment paper or egg membrane or goat bladder, etc. It is said that osmosis is a process by which the molecules of a solvent pass from a solution of a lower concentration to the solution of a higher concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. Osmosis is a process without any expenditure of the energy. The process continues until the concentrations become equal on either side of the membrane. Now let's talk about the process of osmosis that is controlled by two important factors. Number one, concentration of the dissolved solutes in a solution, and number two, the pressure difference. Now there are three different types of solutions. Number one, isotonic solution. Number two, hypertonic solution, and number three, hypotonic solution. Now let's talk about them in brief. An isotonic solution is one that has the same concentration of the solutes both inside and outside the cell. And a hypertonic solution is one that has a higher solute concentration outside the cell than the inside. And number third, a hypertonic solution is the one that has a higher solute concentration inside the cell than the outside. From the diagram given below, I hope it is clear to you all that what is an isotonic solution, what is a hypertonic solution, and what is a hypotonic solution. I think you all are familiar to these two terms, which is the endoosmosis and the exoosmosis. Yes, you're right. These two are the types of osmosis. Now, what is an endoosmosis? When a substance is placed in a hypotonic solution, the solvent molecules move inside the cell and the cell becomes turgid or deplasmolysis. This is known as endoosmosis. And what is exoosmosis? When a substance is placed in a hypertonic solution, the solvent molecules move outside the cell and the cell becomes flaccid or plasmolysis. This is known as exoosmosis. Let's make it clear for you all. Just try to make a column between the two, which is endoosmosis versus the exosmosis. Endoosmosis refers to the osmosis toward the inside of a cell or a vessel, whereas exosmosis refers to the osmosis toward the outside of a cell or a vessel. Now, in endoosmosis, water moves into the cell, while in exosmosis, water moves out of the cell. Occurs when the cells are placed in hypotonic solutions for endosmosis, and occurs when the cells are placed in hypertonic solution for the exosmosis. In endosmosis, it occurs when the solute concentration of the surroundings is less than the solute concentration inside the cell, whereas in exosmosis it occurs when the solute concentration of the surroundings is higher than the solute concentration inside the cell. Quickly jot down these points which I am telling you right now so that it becomes easier and helpful for you to understand it later. Another difference between endoosmosis and exosmosis is that the water potential of the surroundings is higher than that of the cytosol in endoosmosis, whereas in exosmosis the water potential of the surroundings is less than that of the cytosol. The cells may swell in endoosmosis, whereas in exosmosis the cells may shrink. Last but not the least, an example of endoosmosis can be the absorption of the capillary water from the soil by the roots and the entrance of the water into the xylem vessels. In exosmosis, an example can be the movement of water from the root hair cells to the cortical cells of the root. Hope you all have understood what is endoosmosis and what is exosmosis. Now let's come to the root pressure. It is the transverse osmotic pressure within the cells of a root system that causes sap to rise through a plant stem to the leaves. Now, root pressure occurs in the xylem of some vascular plants when the soil moisture level is higher, either at night or when the transpiration is low during the day. This process is produced by the osmotic pressure in the cells of the root. Now, the root pressure is more common during the spring seasons before the leaves develop and the rate of the transpiration is rapid. You can see a diagram is given here to show the root pressure. Now, let's talk a little bit about the active transport. There are concentration gradients between the cell's interior environment and exterior environment. A higher concentration of solute is when there is more solute. Example, salt dissolved in the solvent, which is water. So 10 gram of salt dissolved in 50 milliliter is more concentrated than 5 gram of salt dissolved in 50 milliliter of water. As we have discussed it in the earlier slides, osmosis is the diffusion of the water molecules down the concentration gradient through a semi-permeable membrane. The water moves from an area of high concentration to the low concentration. Can you quickly tell me what do you mean by an active transport? Active transport is basically the movement of the solutes from an area of low concentration to the high concentration, so against the concentration gradient. It may help to consider this as the opposite of osmosis. Since we are going against the gradient, the active transport requires a pump or a carrier protein in the cell membrane, and therefore energy can be made through the respiration. Now we all know what is a transpiration, right? Like all the living organisms, plants also require an excretory system to discharge the excess water from their body. This process of elimination of the excess water from the plant body is known as transpiration. It is generally the evaporation of the water from the surface of the leaves. Now, by definition, transpiration is the biological process by which the water is lost in the form of water vapor from the aerial parts of the plants. During the process of transpiration, the water molecules in the plant tissues are removed from the aerial parts of the plants. Only a small amount of water absorbed by the plants is utilized in growth and development. The rest is eliminated in the form of transpiration. I think we all are familiar with these terms, the types of transpiration, which follows the stomatal transpiration, the lenticular transpiration, and the cuticular transpiration. Now, what is stomatal transpiration? It is the evaporation of water from the stomata of the plants. Most of the water from the plants is transpired this way. The water near the surface of the leaves charges into the vapor and evaporates when the stomata are open, while the lenticular transpiration is that where the lenticels are minute openings in the bark of the branches and twigs. Evaporation of water from the lenticels of the plants is known as the lenticular transpiration. Lenticels are present in all the plants. A minimal amount of water is lost through the lenticels. Now, what is cuticular transpiration? Any guesses? It is the evaporation of water from the cuticle of the plants. The cuticle is a waxy covering on the surface of the leaves of the plants. About 5 to 10% of the water from the leaves is lost through the cuticular transpiration. During the dry conditions, when the stomata are closed, more water is transpired through the cuticles. Now let's quickly talk about the significance of the transpiration in plants. Transpiration helps in the conduction of water and minerals to the different parts of the plants. Due to the continuous elimination of water from the plant body, there is a balance of water maintained within the plant. Now, suction force is created by the transpiration that helps in the upward movement of the water in the plants. It maintains osmosis and keeps the cells rigid. Now, the loss of the water vapor from the plant cools down the plant when the weather is very hot. Now, the young plants or plants without the woody stems require water for the structural support. Transpiration helps maintain the turgidity in plants. I hope you are all clear with this topic till now. Let's go on to another, which says the factors affecting the transpiration in plants. You all know that there is a close interrelationship between the transpiration and the leaf structure. The rate at which the transpiration occurs refers to the amount of water lost by the plants over a given time period. Plants regulate the rate of transpiration by opening and closing of the stomata. There are, however, a number of external factors that affect the rate of transpiration, namely the temperature, light intensity, and humidity and wind. It is now clear from the diagram that how a stomata closed looks like and how a stomata which is open looks like. Now let's think that how the temperature can affect the transpiration. The temperature affects the transpiration rate in two ways. Firstly, at the warmer temperature, the water molecules move faster and the rate of the evaporation from the stomata is therefore much faster. And secondly, the water holding the capacity of the warm air is greater than that of the cold air. Now, what does the light intensity does? At high light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases. As the photosynthesis increases, the amount of the stored glucose in the guard cells increases. This lowers the water potential to the leaf. That is, the contents of the leaf are less dilute. As the water potential decreases, more water enters the guard cells, making them more turgid. Now, the turgor pressure of the guard cells leads to an opening of the stomata, resulting in transpiration, as you can see from the two graphs given here in the right hand side. Now, how does the relative humidity affect the temperature? The amount of the water vapor in the air is referred to as the humidity. Water always moves down a concentration gradient. Therefore, when the humidity is high, the water potential gradient is shallow and the rate of transpiration will be low. However, if the atmosphere is dry, there will be a steep water concentration gradient and the outside air, and the rate of transpiration will therefore be fast. Now, wind. The wind in the water is lost from the leaf. It forms a thin layer outside the leaf. This reduces the water potential between the leaf and the atmosphere outside. When there is wind, This air blown away, thus maintaining the water potential gradient across the leaf. See the two graphs. I hope it will be clear to you all. Now let's talk about the ascent of sap. When the water evaporates through the leaves, a pool is created through the xylem and the water moves back to the leaves. This is known as the transpiration pool, as shown in the diagram. The ascent of sap that is driven by the transpiration depends on the following properties of water. Cohesion. This is the mutual attraction between the molecules of water. Adhesion. The attraction of the water molecules towards the polar surfaces. And the surface tension. The molecules of the water are more attracted to each other in the liquid phase than in the gas phase. We already know the terms xylem and phloem. Now let's talk about the structure of xylem. Xylem cells are elongated and thick-walled. Xylem tissue consists of the xylem vessels and xylem parenchyma. And the function of xylem is to transport the water from the roots to the shoots and the leaves, and it also gives the mechanical support to the plant. The structure of phloem says that it consists of a column of sieve tubes and companion cells. The sieve tubes are separated by the sieve plates. The phloem consists of the sieve tubes, companion cells, the phloem parenchyma, and the phloem fibers. Now the primary function is the support of the sugars. Phloem may also contain cells that have a mechanical support function. Let's consider that the phloem and the xylem are the complex tissues that perform the transportation of food and water in a plant. They are the vascular tissues of the plant and together form the vascular bundles. They work together as a sheet to bring out the effective transformation of food, nutrients, minerals, and water. Now quickly jot down the comparison chart that I am giving right now about the differences between the phloem and the xylem. In the functional area, the phloem and the xylem differs as the phloem, the transportation of the food and the nutrients such as sugar and amino acids from the leaves to the storage organs and growing parts of the plant. This movement of substances is called the translocation. While in xylem, the transport of water and minerals from the roots to the aerial parts of the plant. I hope you all are writing this down. Now let's come to the differences in movements. In phloem, the bidirectional, that is, it moves up or down the plant stem from the source to the sink. And in xylem, the directional is unidirectional, that is, it moves up the plant stem. In occurrences in the phloem part, the roots, stems, and the leaves transports the sucrose to the growth, that is, the roots and the shoots, and the storage regions of the plant, which is the seeds, fruit, and the swollen roots. But in xylem, these occurrences are in the roots, stems, and leaves. In the structural part, we can define the differences between the phloem and the xylem as in phloem, the elongated tubular shape with thin-walled sieve tubes. The sieve tubes have pores at each end in the cross walls and microtubules that extend between the sieve elements, allowing the longitudinal flow of the material. While in xylem, the tubular shape with no cross walls, which allows a continuous column of water, plus it facilitates more rapid transport within the xylem cells. There are two types, protoxylem, first form xylem, plus the metaxylem, macroxylem, depending on the pattern of the lignin. While the phloem, the nature of the tissue is the living tissue with little cytoplasm but no nucleus or tonoplast. But in xylem, the nature of the tissues are, it is a dead tissue at maturity so that there is a hollow with no cell contents. The shape for the phloem is not star-shaped, while the shape of xylem is star-shaped. The location of the vascular bundle in phloem, the phloem occurs on the outer side of the vascular bundle, while in xylem, the xylem occupies the center of the vascular bundle. I hope this comparison will help you to understand the differences between phloem and xylem in a far better way. Now let's quickly talk about the importance of the minerals. We all know that the minerals are the nutrients that exist in the body and are essential as our need for the oxygen to sustain life. Now minerals are also found in organic and inorganic combinations in food in the body. Only 5% of the human body weight is mineral matter, vital to all the mental and the physical processes and for the total well-being. They are the most important factors in maintaining all physiological processes and are constituents of the teeth, bones, tissues, blood, muscle, and cells. We all know that there are two types of minerals. Number one, micronutrients, and number two, macronutrients. Let's talk about micronutrients. Micronutrients are the essential elements needed by life in small quantities. They include microminerals and vitamins. Microminerals elements include at least iron, cobalt, chromium, copper, iodine, manganese, selenium, zinc, and molybdenum. And in the micronutrients, it also says that the diseases caused by the lack of macronutrients and micronutrients can be rickets, which is happen in lack of vitamin D, goiter, which happens in lack of iodine, and anemia, which lacks of iron. Now you must be thinking that the macronutrients are just the opposite of micronutrients. Yes, you're right. Macronutrients are all those types which have their own specific roles and functions in the body and supply us with the calories or the energy. For this reason, the body requires these nutrients in a relatively large amounts to grow, develop, repair, and feel good. Now, it follows that the fats, the proteins, and the carbohydrates. We all know that the fats may include any kind of dairy products or meats or poultry or seafood or eggs or even avocados and coconuts. The protein also includes the eggs, meat, etc. The carbohydrates can be the fruits, the vegetables, the dairy, and the grain food groups that contains carbohydrates. I hope you all have liked the video and understood it also. If you have any queries or doubts regarding the same topic, you put your queries down in the comment box below.